Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Bienvenidos al primer evento
Welcome
del
to the
Intergrupo
first event of the
para la
Biodiversity
biodiversidad, la caza y el
Hunting
mundo
Countryside Intergroup.
Muchas gracias a todos por
Thank you very
conectarse
much
con
to all of you
nosotros
who took the time to
para
connect
hablar
to
de un
this
tema tan
webinar
importante
on the
como la gestión
downlisting
sin
of the
eficiencia
wolf,
del
a
lobo.
way forward to the EU.
Quiero saludar muy
I
especialmente
would like to give a special welcome
a mi compañero querido
to my colleague and good
Herbert
friend
Dorman,
Herbert Dorfman,
Andrea Vettori,
as well as to salute
jefe de
Andrea
unidad de
Vettori,
DG
head of
Environment,
unit of DG Environment,
a Jürgen Tuck,
a Jürgen
director
Tuck,
general de ELO,
Director
y a
General of
todos los
ILO,
expertos que nos acompañan
and to all
esta
the
tarde.
experts that have joined us
Quien
this
tuviste
afternoon.
la oportunidad de
For those who
participar en las
participated in the
reuniones del
intergroup
Intergrupo
events during
en la
the
legislatura
previous
pasada,
term,
recordaréis
you
los
may
intensos
recall our
debates y
discussions
batallas que
on the
libramos
challenges arising from the
sobre la gestión
presence
cinegética
of
del lobo
wolves in
para
Europe,
alcanzar un equilibrio
the
sostenible
difficult faced by the
entre la
farming
protección
community, and the
de la
efforts to
especie
establish a
y
sustainable
los
balance
legítimos
between
intereses
species
de
protection
nuestros
and
agricultores
farmers'
y nuestros
legitimate
ganaderos.
interests.
En mi país,
This was
España,
especially prominent in
hemos
Spain,
visto cómo
my home country,
distintos niveles de
where the
protección del
distinction
lobo
between a
en
protected
una
wolf
u
population
otra
north
orilla
of
del
the
Duero
Duero River and a
han
strictly
tenido un
protected one
impacto
south
en
of
el
the river
crecimiento
proved
demográfico
an
de esta
ineffective
especie.
as wolf population continued to
En el sur
expand
del
south
Duero
of the Duero.
fuimos testigos de un aumento de las manadas de lobo debido a su
This growth
estricta
brought
protección.
significant challenges to the farming sector in
Esto
the region.
ocasionó desafíos titánicos y múltiples dificultades para el sector ganadero español,
This was particularly
que
difficult for
dejó en
the
evidencia
farming
la
sector,
necesidad
underscoring the
urgente
urgent need
de contar con herramientas de gestión
for
más
more
flexibles
flexible
y
management
eficaces.
solutions.
Esta situación se
Matters
agravó
worsened when
cuando
the
la
then
entonces
Minister
ministra
of
del Medio
Environment
Ambiente y hoy
and now Vice
vicepresidenta de la
President of
Comisión
the
Europea,
European Commission, Teresa Rivera,
amplió las
extended
restricciones
restrictions,
a la gestión
preventing
cinemática
effective
del lobo.
management of the northern wolf population.
También
As
continúa
well,
siendo un problema
abundance has now
la
recently lifted.
división entre las categorías
The
de
division
especies
between
protegidas
protected and
y
strictly
especies
protected
estrictamente protegidas
species
que establece la Directiva de Hábitat.
that's established in the Habitat Directive remains
Esto
a
es solo
problem.
un ejemplo
This
de la
is just an example
importancia
on the
de
importance
seguir
of
trabajando
continuing
juntos
our
para
work
continuar
in order to keep
obteniendo
achieving
resultados que sean
concrete
tangibles
results
y
in
en
the
la
right
dirección correcta.
direction.
Ya lo logramos
We already
con una
made great progress
resolución
with the
del
resolution from the EPP
liderada
and led by
por
Herbert Dorfman.
También lo logramos
We also
cuando
achieved
convencimos a la
it
Comisión
when
de
we
que
convinced the
apoyara con
Commission
éxito
to
la
support
reforma de
with
la
success
Convención
the
de
reform
Berna
of the
en
Bern
relación al
Convention
nivel de
regarding the
protección del lobo.
protection of the wolves.
Pero aún tenemos
However,
tareas pendientes.
we still have pending tasks.
Por eso me complace inaugurar
It is
este
therefore
acto
with great satisfaction that I open today's
precisamente
event,
ahora que contamos
as
con
we
una
now have
propuesta de
a
la
European
Comisión
Commission
Europea
proposal
sobre la
on
mesa.
the table,
Una
an
iniciativa
initiative
que hace
that
unos
some
años
years
era
would have been
impensable.
unthinkable.
El acto de hoy
Today's event
reúne
will
a un
bring
amplio
together
abanico
a
de
wide
ponentes
range
que
of
analizarán
speakers
la
who will
propuesta de la
discuss the
Comisión
European
Europea
Commission's
para
proposal
modificar
to
el
amend
estatuto de
the
conservación del
conservation
lobo
status of the
en la
wolf
Directiva de
under
Hábitat,
the Habitat
pasando de
Directive,
estrictamente
from
protegidos
strictly
a
protected
protegidos
to
básicos.
protected.
Se trata de una propuesta
This legislative
legislativa de
initiative
gran calado
is particularly
que
significant
busca
as
el
it seeks
equilibrio
to
entre
strike a
el deber
balance
de los
between
Estados
maintaining
miembros
member
de la
states'
conservación favorable del
obligations
lobo,
to
la
ensure
flexibilidad
wolf population remain in a
necesaria para una gestión eficaz.
favorable conservation status and offering them flexibility needed for effective management.
El objetivo no es otro
The
que
proposal
favorecer la
aims to achieve
convivencia
a more
entre
harmonious
las
coexistence
comunidades rurales
between
y
rural
esta
communities and wolves,
porque debemos dar respuesta
because
a
we
una
need to give
preocupación histórica
answers to
de
a
nuestro
long-standing
medio
concerns
rural.
from
Y ahora,
our farmers.
sin más preámbulo,
And now,
le cedo
without
la
further
palabra al
delay,
moderador de
let
esta
me give the
jornada,
floor to the
al
moderator,
director general de ELO,
Mr.
Jürgen Tuck.
Jürgen Tuck, Director General of ILO.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zurido, for your welcoming remarks during this webinar. Indeed, I'm Jürgen Tuck. I'm Secretary General of the European Landowners Organization. and ELO is one of the two co-chairs of the European Commission's large carnivore platform on coexistence. What we would like to do today is, let's say, to have a very open discussion on the way that, let's say, the conservation status became a lot more favorable during the last years. That makes that the wolf populations today are much more viable than they were, let's say, 2 or 3 decades ago, when the wolf almost disappeared completely in Europe. Now we see that the populations today are at a level that there is an increasing interference also with local communities in the countryside. And so the discussion today is a little bit more about, how far can we go with conservation? How much tolerance has the countryside towards coexistence with the wolf? The debate on the wolf conservation status has intensified, I would say, since 2022. And we are all aware that the Bern Convention Standing Committee supported the EU's proposal to downlist the wolf. Today's objective is certainly not to reach consensus among all of the partners and among all of the views, but the idea is to have a better understanding of as well the ecological, the legal, the socio-economic dimensions of downlisting the wolf. And of course, even with a downlisted wolf, we still have to explore a number of constructive paths forward to make sure that people in the countryside can live and coexist with the wolf and with other large carnivores in the future. Now, our first speaker is a member of the European Parliament. It's Mr. Dorfman. He's a member of the EPP, and he is an Italian. Italy having a large wolf population, that makes him immediately also an expert, and he has a close contact with people living in the countryside in Italy. And he was also at the origin of the European Parliament's resolution on the protection of livestock farming and large carnivores in Europe. Mr. Dorfman, we would be very happy to hear you about this resolution and about the action you have taken. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Director General. I'd like to greet everybody, especially my dear friend and colleague, Juan Ignacio Zoido, who is chairing the meeting. Well, a lot of things have already been said by colleague Zoido and by yourself. I can be very short. First of all, I would like, and you, Director General, said this proposal will not make happy everybody, and I'm well aware about this. But I think we should always underline what are the reasons for this downgrading. It is not primarily the fact that there is a huge problem between animal breeders and the wolf. Clearly, that is also the case. The wolf creates a problem in rural areas and especially also in mountain areas where I'm coming from. But the main reason is that the population of wolves increased since the regulation or the directive, entered into force already more than 30 years ago. So it is. I think the lists prepared and decided in 1992 were perfectly okay. So the wolf was in the European Union, which was a different European Union as today, was close to extinction, and the lawmakers at the time did also a good job, because the two regions where the wolf had a stable, let's say, population in the European Union of 1992, rightly were classified, or the wolf was classified in this region in Annex 5 of the directive. So somehow, maybe what happened, and what is clearly also creating a problem, we need to admit this, is also a success of the directive. The directive worked, so that the wolf is not an animal, not a species which is close to extinction today. It recovered all over Europe. We have today more than 25,000 wolves in Europe, and we have more than 3,000 wolves in my own member state in Italy. So we have, again, a stable population of wolves in the European Union. And I'm convinced, and this we need to say very clearly, this downgrading will not endanger at all this stable population, because this downgrading from strictly protected to protected does not mean that all the wolves can be eliminated now. On the contrary, the wolf remains a protected species. So what is the path still to go? We are very close to the final result. As you most probably know, the council already next week should take a decision on the fast procedure. So the parliament also already decided here, the responsible environment committee, ENVI committee, decided on the fast procedure. The council still needs to decide. I hope it will work out. So I hope there will be an agreement for this fast procedure. So a vote in Coreper fundamentally, and then in the next Strasbourg week in May, we go for the fast procedure. This means that the President of the House will announce on Monday of the Strasbourg week the fast procedure. There will be 24 hours to be against this procedure. I hope the majority will be in favor. And then there's the other 24 hours to present amendments. And if no amendments are presented, or however, if there are present amendments is the same, the Parliament is going to vote on the Thursday of the Strasbourg week. So within the May Strasbourg week, if the Council is helpful, we should close the ITER, and the downgrading is done. Will this solve all the problems? No, clearly not. And here I fully agree with what you, Secretary General, has said. The wolf, we will still have a population of wolves in the European Union. This population will still be stable. We have more possibilities to manage this population. But on the other way around, we need also to tell the farmers that we will have still wolves in the European Union, and that we need to deal with this population. So we still have to work on coexistence, and I think we have also to work on the guidelines for coexistence, which the Commission is preparing and prepared. We need to create the flexibility member states and regions need in order to manage the situation on the ground. And with this I can also close, then it's up to the member states, because as we all know, the wild animals, and among them the wolves, are not property of the European Union, at least in Italy, and in a lot of other member states, wild animals are property of the state. And the member states in the capitals, and where it's a regional competence in the regions, they need to decide how to deal afterwards. They have more flexibility. They can deal in a more flexible way with this situation, but they need to act. And I really hope that the member states then use this improved and better and higher flexibility they will have after our decision, and that we come to a reasonable management of the species in Europe. To end, I would only like to thank everybody who helped in the last years to come to this result, which is remarkable. I think 2-3 years ago, nobody believed that we can downgrade the wolf in the Flora Fauna Habitat Directive. There was a clearly, let's say, till the vote here in the Parliament, there was a clear majority against this procedure. FACE helped, a lot of colleagues helped, associations helped. So thank you very much for this, and I really hope that we can come to the final result in the next weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dorfman, for making your time available to have this explanation what was at the origin of your resolution. The next in line is Andrea Vettori. He's the head of unit for nature conservation within DG Environment. And that makes that, let's say, he has, or at least the European Commission has a certain role to play within the present procedure. We have heard that, let's say, at the same time that the wolf is indicating the success of the directives, at the same time you have now a downgrading, and I think, Andrea, you will be very happy to tell us a little bit about how the European Commission is handling this.
Thank you very much, Jürgen, and thank you very much to FACE, to MEP Juan Ignacio Zoido Alvarez, and Herbert Dorfman for the nice words at the beginning on the topic. And I'm happy to give you a short presentation of the proposal of the Commission, because indeed aims on a very fine balance, as you already said. So I'll try to share now the screen and show you the presentation. Voila, one. Voila. So I'm happy to present you the proposal that the Commission presented a few weeks ago for a targeted amendment of the Habitats Directive annexes on the protection status of the wolf. As you probably recall, on the 26th of September 24, the Council adopted the Commission proposal for a Council decision to table on behalf of the EU a proposal to amend the appendices of the Bern Convention. The Bern Convention is under the Council of Europe, and it covers some 50 parties. So it's the whole of EU plus all the other European countries and some neighboring countries. Following that, the Commission then presented on behalf of the EU the proposal, which was adopted by the Standing Committee of the Bern Convention on 6 December 2024, and entered into force on 7 March, because the decisions of the Standing Committee takes effect 3 months after the adoption, in case, unless there are some 1/3 of the parties that oppose it. And this was not the case. There were only 3 parties who oppose it, so the change will not apply to them. But the amendment of the Bern Convention entered into force. And this was, of course, a precondition, as we always said, for the Commission to be able to amend the protection status under the Habitats Directive, so under EU legislation. On the same day, the Commission has adopted a proposal to amend, as I said, the annexes of the Habitats Directive for what the protection status of the wolf concerns. So, what is the proposal? The proposal is very, very short, and it aims at aligning the Habitats Directive to the change in the legal protection status of the wolf under the Bern Convention. So it's a direct and targeted amendment of only the annexes of the directive, and removing the wolf from Annex 4, which is the strict protection, and adding it to Annex 5 for all countries, because indeed, as was mentioned at the beginning, some countries already at the time of joining the EU, because in their country the wolf already was in good conservation status, they had it already in Annex 5, and so now is aligned for everybody in Annex 5. This was also in line with the Commission's commitment that the proposal is limited solely to the wolf. So the differences between Annex 4 and Annex 5 is that Annex 4 listed the species in need of strict protection, while Annex 5 lists the species for which exploitation might be subject of management measures. So there are the taking from the wild and the exploitation is possible, but might be subject to management measures because they're still protected under the EU legislation. So the wolf will be subject to the protection set out in Article 14 of the Habitats Directive, requiring member states to take measures to ensure that the taking in the wild of the specimens of the species of wild fauna and flora listed in Annex 5, as well as their exploitation, is compatible with maintaining them at favorable conservation status. So at the same time, the strict protection regime that has covered the wolf until now, which is in Article 12, ceases to apply for the wolf. Member states may derogate from the requirements of Article 14, provided they satisfy the requirements set out in Article 16 of the directive. I know this sounds very legalistic, but in a nutshell, there are always possibility to derogate according to specific provision and criteria. So what does it mean concretely, this legal change? Well, as my previous speaker have indicated, this offers more flexibility in managing wolf population to member states. But it does not change the substantive obligation to ensure that the favorable conservation status of the wolf is achieved and maintained. And this was very much stressed also in two recent legal cases by the European Court of Justice that provided quite a lot of clarification of what does this imply. So member states must continue to monitor the conservation status of the species and to regularly report to the Commission every 6 years not only the population, but the conservation status, the range, the trends, and so on. If the surveillance of the species reveals it is necessary, member states may implement temporary or local prohibition of restriction of taking or hunting from the wild. Member states, and this is also quite important, as always on environmental legislation, member states can decide to keep the wolf as a strictly protected species under national legislation if they deem it necessary and appropriate, because member states can always implement stricter species protection rules at national level depending on the specific situation and their nature conservation policies at national level. Another element which is important is that this has no implication for the possibility to access EU funds for coexistence and prevention measures, because for the member states who have planned in their CAP strategic plans funding for farmers for the prevention measures and to defend their livestock from attacks from wolves and other large carnivores, they can still access. It's not linked because the animal, the species remains as protected. Nor it changes for the national state aid schemes rules that are in place in many member states to compensate farmers for losses related to wolf attacks. That's all. I wanted to thank you very much. Here you have two links. One link is to our website where you can find all the guidance, all the relevant information, including the legal proposal. And the other link is the EU platform on coexistence between people and large carnivores that is co-managed, is based on stakeholders, and ELO is a key partner, and Jürgen Tack is, as he said, chairing this. While I put this here, because as the previous speaker have indicated, the wolf will be there, and in some regions will increase because their favorable conservation status will have to be maintained. Therefore, it will be even more important to continue to work with local communities to develop solutions that work at the local level, bringing all the stakeholders together. And the Commission is ready to continue and has stepped up efforts to support these activities with a lot of initiatives under the platform, and continuous effort, as I said, through the EU funds and so on. So this will continue to remain a major task. And then, as others have said, this will remain the key element of the way forward for the EU on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea. When you were giving the two links to the websites, he was clearly referring to website links and not to the other large carnivore present in Europe. But thank you very much for your insights from the Commission's viewpoint. I have seen in the chat that some participants are not seeing the slides. In their case, I would like to ask you to reconnect, because let's say a majority of those who are among us are seeing the slides. So it's, let's say, a local problem on the viewer's side. So if you reconnect, most probably the problem will be solved. I'm also seeing that people are already posting a number of questions as well in the chat as in the question and answer section. I would like to ask you to, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. That makes it more easy for as well the speakers as myself as a moderator to give to have a global overview of the questions coming in. Questions will be tackled after our panel debate, and we have three experts with us. And the first one is Dr. John Linnell. He's a senior research scientist at the Norwegian Institute for Nature Research. And I think we can absolutely say that he's an expert in the field on the interactions between humans and wildlife with a view to promoting coexistence. Let's say John has been, I think, as long as I've been involved with the wolf, a major player and expert in the field. So, John, it's a pleasure to have you with us. It's great you have found the time, and I'm happy to give you the floor.
Wow, thank you, Jürgen, for that glowing introduction. I should almost actually record that and play it back when I'm having a bad day. Even though being an expert, it might be actually overselling it, because we are actually heading into uncharted territory here, right? As wolf is downlisted to Annex 5. This is a new place where I don't think anyone can really claim to have the expertise on how it's going to play out. But we just have sort of good ideas. But I think all of us will be curious and excited to see what is going to happen. As Mr. Dorfman said in his statement, that in some ways this could be viewed as a sign of success. Wolves have come back to many areas. We have maybe 22,000 wolves now on our continent. And in some ways, one could think, well, this downlisting is just a consequence of that kind of success. However, it is a very controversial action. It's kind of controversial among many members of the public and stakeholders who have sort of a principled opposition to animals being killed, which is a perfectly okay kind of point of view. And it also clashes with some kind of emerging conservation paradigms who put a very strong focus on the ecological function of species and not just the viability of their kind of conservation. So there is certainly controversy. However, there's also really strong support, right? There are many stakeholders, many rural people who will really welcome this. Like kind of for them, the strict protection over the last decades has been a source of conflict. And in many ways, the protection itself has been just as controversial as the actual impact of the wolf as an animal. So there is no doubt that there are going to be supporters and opponents with very different perspectives on this. But the decision is done. I'm assuming that Parliament are going to approve this, and we're moving forward to a new kind of reality. The wolves will be on Annex 5. What does this actually mean? Well, first of all, I think we can say that it is perfectly possible to conserve wolves on Annex 5. Many countries have been doing so for the last decades. Like, for example, the Baltic states have had the wolf on Annex 5 ever since they entered the EU. They've been hunting the wolves, and the wolves are doing perfectly okay. Poland has had wolves on Annex 5 and have chosen not to hunt them, which is also an option that will remain in the future. Northern Spain has had wolves, and they have expanded under Annex 5. So there certainly are no problems in principle with having wolves on Annex 5. It can be done. But managing a hunted population of wolves actually requires a much greater investment in monitoring and science. If you're not hunting animals, then you don't have to have such precise kind of data for kind of monitoring. If you are hunting and to maintain a sustainable and adaptive harvest, then you really will need to have to intensify monitoring, to have better data, and to have data which the public actually believe. So here the hunters will clearly have a role in kind of monitoring, but it will certainly need the engagement of the scientific community to convey trust and credibility for this. So there will have to be a huge increase in the precision of the monitoring. Introducing hunting adds an extra tool into our toolkit, but it is not going to be the miracle answer to all conflicts. It may, in some situations, help livestock, but mainly the first line of protection of livestock will always have to be protection. Hunting the wolf is just one additional thing which may have some limited effect in some contexts. But what hunting wolves does do is it conveys a sense of empowerment and agency to rural stakeholders who have felt that the strict protection limits their options to influence their own reality. So it's very much the perceptions, I think, which are going to benefit here, rather than maybe the measurable and objective impact which it has. Unfortunately, these arguments were not really made in the political discussions leading up to downlisting. All we heard about was protecting human life and protecting livestock. And these are probably the conflicts that will benefit least from the downlisting. It's the conflict with the hunters and this wider kind of acceptance from the rural people who will probably can benefit the most. Unfortunately, the process leading up to this was also quite conflictful. That the procedures adopted have been slightly irregular, and the rhetoric around science has been at least fairly selective at best. So one could really hope that we can learn from this landmark downlisting process and improve it for future cases where species may want to adjust their annex appendix in their annex status in both directions. But overall, we're moving into a new era of wolf conservation. We have not been here before. And it's a test case of what happens if a species is moved from one annex to a lower protection status. This is going to place a really heavy burden on national and regional wildlife management agencies and on the hunters to show that they take this responsibility seriously. And I think the whole way here, we'll have to learn as we go. We have not been here before. So this is going to be an adaptive course where we have to make sure that we're learning from all the mistakes and all of the successes that we make in the future. But there is no doubt that we're moving forward to a new direction where we have not been before. So thank you. That's all I really had to say.
Thank you very much, John. And let's say if you feel bad in the future, you give me a call and then I will repeat my introductory sentences. In that way, we can solve that. Before we will go into questions and answers, I will give the three experts a possibility to give their view. And our next speaker is Niall Curley. He learned everything about the wolf at ELO, but today he's a senior policy advisor at Copa Cogeca. And let's say they are representing the farmers community in Europe, and one of those communities asking for the downlisting of the wolf. Niall, it will be a pleasure to hear how the farmers are looking at the wolf and the downlisting.
Thank you, Jürgen, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation for the farmers and agri-cooperatives to speak on this topic. Hope you can all hear me well. With this, we have been calling for the change in the annex and the position of the wolf for quite some time at this stage. It is something that we see as indeed an added tool. It is something that we continue to talk about in the same context as protection and compensation measures in how the wolf should be managed alongside humans in a harmonious coexistence, which is the point of the Habitats Directive, in order to bring them both together. But I would just say that over the past decades, the wolf, as I echo many other speakers who have already said, the wolf has moved to a very favorable conservation status when it comes to the actual population in specific areas. And across the EU, there has been, when it came to this proposal, there was the discussion with regard to numbers and to actually see how many wolves there are in the EU. And I would just echo what John has said, because there is a lack of true accounting for how many wolves there are across the EU, and it was a potential change of this back in 2022, coming from the Swiss government in the Bern Convention, that called an IUCN report, wherein this labels the wolf population in the EU of least concern, with 21,500 wolves at that time. This then was followed by the report that was called for by the European Commission, and that echoed the same new numbers, even more so than the IUCN report. But when it comes to actually how farmers are affected and how we see this, we welcome it, as I said. But when it comes to what we see on a day-to-day basis, we have done our own accounting internally in Copa and Cogeca, but there are also the figures with regard to the attacks that are done upon livestock and livestock units across the EU on the Commission website with regard to this, and across a variety of different information streams. It is estimated that annually about 65,500 head of livestock are killed, but 75% of those are sheep and goats. In Spain, this is usually about 14,000, France 12,000, and Italy around 10. And this is something that we see. This is not necessarily the numbers we have every single year, but it is in around the same aspect as that. But I would ask, when it comes to how agriculture is taken, we are dealing with protection measures. When we're dealing with management, when it comes to the increasing number, the continuous increasing number of wolves across the EU, we have these protection measures such as fences not being justifiable anymore at great cost, but then also keeping out large numbers of biodiversity of their own. The housing, wolves can get into housing, believe it or not. Alarms, wolves get used to alarms, and protection dogs or guardian dogs are very expensive to keep and also can be killed by wolves in large packs. And so when it comes to actually being attacked and your livestock, your herd, your flock being attacked and killed, it is a devastating amount of a loss upon individual farmers across vast regions of the EU, specifically in transhumanance or migrating agriculture in the mountains, where it is already quite difficult to make a living out of this in the first place. But I would just continue to say, as others have said, that this is just another tool. We're talking about harmonious coexistence, is protection, but then also using this tool, giving the member states that tool to use if they so wish. And I saw there are some questions with regard to, is every member state going to change? There are already some that have said they will not. I believe at the time of the vote, countries such as Portugal and Luxembourg said automatically that they would not be changing their national legislation, and that is their right. But what this does do is give those member states who wish to change this and to actually have a population management plan in place to look at the numbers, to see what can be done in order to change the way it is, because the population is not in the best condition, the favorable condition across the EU. There are a variety of populations that need still to be managed and improved upon, such as in genetic diversity and in other issues. Not just the amount you have. You want quality, not just quantity. And that is the issue that we really do see here. And with the way that the wolf is protected, specifically under Article 14, in the Habitats Directive, this means that they cannot be moved. They cannot, Article 12, they cannot be captured, they cannot be disturbed, and this is fine. But that was also 30 years ago when this population was on the verge of extinction. What we now see is that these wolves could be transported to other regions in order to facilitate the genetic diversity. These could be facilitated to bring them into areas that are needing them and away from areas that are overpopulated. And so this is something, as I keep saying, and as everyone keeps calling it, an additional tool within the toolbox. But I would also just say, when it comes to the science, there is a variety of scientific reports out there saying both sides of this. I remember a report that came specifically from Slovakia, maintaining that there was no evidence that wolf hunting done by the government did anything about reducing predation on livestock. But that report was looking at wolf kills or hunting quota per wolf per district per year, which was less than 2% of the population. This is not something that's going to actually remove or reduce the population or reduce predation. When you get a tiny little hammer and you tap it against a mountain, you're not going to knock down the mountain, and you're not going to actually reduce what's there. So that is something we need to acknowledge, that the science, there is a variety of different science that you can do a study design that does not actually reflect the reality of what we have here. And that the reality is that wolf hunting can reduce predation. It can improve the coexistence between humans and biodiversity. I hope that is enough time, and I'll welcome any comments and questions after this. But thank you again for letting the farmers and agri-cooperatives speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Niall, to give the viewpoint from the farmers community. Our third panelist is Friedrich Wolf. He's an international biodiversity policy campaigner for Friends of the Earth Europe. And it's almost impossible not to make a joke with your last name, but I will try to refrain. But let's say the downlisting is certainly not referring to you, but to the other species, I suppose. But Friedrich, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. And I've prepared a presentation, which I'll just share with you in a minute. But indeed, you're right. I mean, my last name indeed means wolf. It's in Lower German, so it's really a coincidence, indeed. So thanks very much. I apologize. I'm not on my normal desk. I got asked very short term to present, so I bear with me if there is some background noise. The location I'm in is not optimal, but I'll try my best to be understood. Okay, I'm trying to share my presentation now. Hang on. Yes, that's good. Okay, can you see it? Can you see my presentation?
No, with yes, now it comes.
It comes. Excellent.
Yeah, let's say if you now still put the presentation. Oh, I'm afraid I'm seeing myself now.
Oh, it says I have shared it. So
at the moment you are sharing your screen instead of a
I'll
PowerPoint
check.
presentation.
How about now?
Perfect.
Ah, excellent. Okay,
Please
that's
proceed.
for me as well. So, thank you for inviting me. I'm trying to put up or give you the perspective from the nature conservation NGO community. I mean, today's webinar is called A Way Forward for the EU. We're putting a big question mark on this because this is, as you may assume, not quite our favorite approach. So just to come back, and much of this has been said already, to give you the overall picture, wolf is an important key predator for intact ecosystems, and it has an important role to regulate ungulates, deers, chamois, etc. There are assessments from some countries, such as Slovakia, that 98% of what wolves feed upon are wild ungulates. So wild animals, it's not that livestock is the main food staple for wolves. And these, with this, they fulfill an important function in the ecosystem because these ungulates cause major problems for forest rejuvenations. Also to bear in mind that there haven't been any fatal attacks on humans in the 21st century, despite the population increase, which already has been mentioned. So, and I do agree with what has been said. I mean, the recovery of the wolf is a major success for nature conservation, which is, of course, something we are delighted about. And I can be brief on this because it was actually quite detailedly presented by Andrea Vettori already. But important for us to say that the Bern Convention only gives a basis for changing the protection status of the wolf and nothing else. Also important to say that the European Parliament is free to reject this proposal if they so wish, and that member states can deviate from the rules and implement a stronger protection status. Important also to say that this year the Article 17 reports will be coming up, and we expect member states to adapt their management to the protection status to the status of the conservation status of the wolf. So here you have a map of the wolf distribution that's taken from the report prepared by the Large Carnivore Initiative for the Bern Convention in 2022, which already was quoted. And as you can see, we have 9 different subpopulations, and the situation of the wolf is different across Europe. In the areas which are shaded, the populations are in a good conservation status, but that is only in the eastern part, in the Baltic, in the Carpathians, and in the Balkans. And in the other populations, the conservation status is not yet in a good status. Important to note. So in all of Western Europe, the wolf is still under some degree of threat under the red lists. And it is not, therefore, in our opinion, in a favorable conservation status. And we think as long as the favorable conservation status isn't achieved, it is not a good idea to lower the protection status. We also see that if you do not make the management in a careful way and shoot them in randomly and in large numbers, you can disrupt the social structure of packs, and with that actually increase the danger of livestock attacks. So hunting is not the cure-all solution. And the reports that have been quoted don't provide scientific evidence to lower the protection status. Also, as has been said already, there has so far not been a mechanism or any criteria how this down or upscaling under the Bern Convention or under the Habitats Directive is actually supposed to work. This is something that is being tackled now. There is a working group under the Bern Convention that will develop a suggestion how to deal with this in future with other species. So what also has been said, the main difference between the status pro ante and now is that wolves now can be regulated. You can establish quotas instead of reactively allowing for single shootings of problem animals. However, important to note that many of the rules still apply. The wolf is still a protected species. You still need to bring it to a favorable conservation status, or as it's called under the Bern Convention, a level which corresponds to ecological and scientific requirements. And exceptions are only possible under the exception rules of Article 9 Bern Convention, which is pretty much the same as the exception rules under the Habitats Directive. So important to note that the overall target is to get a good conservation status of the wolf. And as has been, already mentioned, it's important, and I think I sense a large amount of agreement. The way forward is to have coexistence, have the necessary prevention measures such as herding dogs or wolf-proof fencing. We have information from Switzerland that for 1 year there were 90% of the livestock that were killed in packs that had not been protected. So that's really demonstrates that there is a large benefit of these measures. And we do hope that these measures will be further used, and we also call on the responsibility of both member states to support those measures, as well, of course, of the farmers, and to embark on these measures wherever possible. And I think this is the way forward, and also to have an ongoing dialogue how to manage the species. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Friedrich. I know you have a train to catch. I would like to leave 5 minutes before the end of this session. I will make sure that if questions are upcoming, I will guide them as soon as possible, so that you're certainly not missing your train. But thank you for your contribution. I would like, first of all, I would like to ask for the members of the European Parliament present in this webinar, if there would be questions coming from their side. As I'm not able to see you, I would like you to put within the chat, let's say shortly, MP and your last name, then I know that I have to give you the floor. Let's say what I heard, Friedrich, from your side is that you were mentioning favorable conservation status not achieved in the 9 European populations. Let me first go to the scientist who has been working on this. And so John, can you give us an update on that favorable conservation status? I also have seen in the chat, let's say, that there are a number of questions whether we are really able to put a favorable conservation status, as we still do that at a member state level instead of at a population level of an animal that is, I would say, extremely international due to the very large range it can walk. Can you give your opinion on the status of that favorable conservation status? Well, not opinion, let's say what science tells us.
Wow, I wish I had about an hour to answer that one. In February, we delivered a report to the Commission that was sort of a recommendation for how one could begin going about calculating a favorable conservation status for large carnivores. And I don't think we should sort of prejudge the classification that the member states are going to make in their current reporting cycle. But what I think we can say, though, is that favorable conservation status is sort of a mixture between a scientific concept and a legal concept. It's not hard science only, and that it might mean different things at different scales, right? So it's a fairly complicated concept. But what I think is very important to underline is the the point that Friedrich made is that wolves have rather different status in different parts of the European continent, right? And somewhat kind of paradoxically, actually, it's the Nordic populations which probably have the lowest conservation status of any wolf populations on our continent. So that this is not something that most people actually associate it with. So I think we have to at least begin now to differentiate between different parts of the continent, accepting that maybe there will be different degrees of freedom in different countries. And the other thing which I think is essential to underline is that any concept of favorable conservation status is not a property of a member state, but it is going to be a property of the biological populations which extend across intranational and international borders. So that there is going to be a need for a high degree of cross-boundary coordination and cooperation in the years to come. So I would guess a short way to say that this is going to be complicated, and it's certainly not going to become any easier under Annex 5. I think I kind of dodged the question actually slightly there. I should maybe go into politics, Jürgen.
No, but it's good to hear, let's say, a scientific view, and let's say, just to summarize, you're mentioning that in the end you're just starting to make a procedure on what is seen as a very complicated concept, and then let's say I automatically would like to go back to Friedrich, because he made that statement: favorable conservation state is not achieved in none of the 9 European populations. As I see that, let's say, science is only starting to start working on the concept. Friedrich, on what do you base that this conservation status is not achieved in those European populations?
So just to be clear, I mean, it is achieved in the eastern populations, to our understanding. I mean, there was this report from the Large Carnivore Initiative, which was presented to the Bern Convention, from which I have the map. And there is a different assessment for each of the 9 populations which exist in Europe. And for the majority, for 6 of them, we don't have a red list assessment that says least concern. Least concern is scientific for it's not threatened. But we have a higher degree of threat to those. And the assumption is that if you have a red list status, that species is not in favorable conservation status. Of course, I mean, it might be that looking at the concept more closely, you might come up, you know, with it might be necessary to align this a bit more in detail. But the general assessment is that the species which is on the red list isn't in favorable conservation status. That's all we know now. But of course, we will know more when we have the Article 17 reports on the table in the next months. So we're looking forward to that. Maybe we can have a different basis for a discussion then. Thank you.
You're referring to those different situations in the different populations depending on the part of Europe. One of the questions we had is, well, member states may implement temporary or local prohibition. Does that mean that that is the way forward, as populations can be very different in the different locations in Europe?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, you can apply different methods of management in different parts. And the situation, as has already been said, is different in the eastern states, in the Baltic states, for example, where you have the wolf under Annex 5 right from the beginning. And from what I hear from colleagues in Latvia, for example, is that it is possible to do so. And that has been said, one of my colleagues as well. So it can be done. But I also agree that you need to do this with care and responsibility and really look at the situation. And as a result, adapt a level of management that allows still for the survival in a good, in a favorable conservation status of the species. So I also agree with John. I mean, we will have lots of more discussions on this, how to do this best. Yeah, but I think for the key message is we need to continue to find a way to live together with the wolf and enable both a good conservation status as well, of course, as an acceptable situation for the farmers, on the livestock farmers. And of course, we expect authorities to support them as best as they can.
Thank you. Niall, we have just heard from Friedrich the way nature conservation organizations are looking at favorable conservation status and how to make use of that within the downlisting of the wolf. I can imagine that there is another perspective from a farmer's point of view, but I would say enlighten us on this.
We see that the favorable conservation status, it is of the overall, and I would go back to the reporting has said, and there is the Habitats reporting, State of Nature report that will come back at July, that will more than likely back up, well, it's not more than likely, it will back up the report that just came back in December of last year, and actually say the same things that we have here, but it's the overall population of the wolf. The overall population of the wolf, yes, it is in least concern under IUCN, and it's in the favorable conservation overall to a certain extent, but across the whole spectrum, there are populations. But the Habitats Directive and the Bern Convention have different ways of dealing with it. As John has explained, it was based on how the member states joined the EU, or the way that they actually had specific arrangements already. What this proposal is actually doing is the overall population is now being considered and changed to Annex 5, not putting additional specificities for this population is good, this population is bad, and changing it around. It's a 2-article piece of text. It's 2 pages in itself, the actual the amending directive, and it put forward this. And what I would also follow what has been said with regards to time. There, in the actual proposal, it gives 18 months after adoption for it to become legally binding. And that will, no matter what, there is 18 months before this actually comes into play. Member states can't even actually legally change it until that has been lapsed. So there is going to be a lot of conversation with regard to the populations, a lot of conversation about actually building transboundary, transnational monitoring and cooperation on the topic. And this is one thing that everyone has been talking about for years and years, is that there needs to be further cooperation between how many, like the monitoring and the actual dealing with wolf populations. There are certain places that are being repopulated now at the moment that we now see in certain countries where the population across Belgium, the Netherlands, and in this specific region is coming back. But that is coming from a German population. And it's just because these are small countries that are closer to big countries that have different packs. And so how these actually develop into the overall spectrum of the variety of different populations is not really the question here, I think. The real question, and what has been dealt with this proposal, is the actual overall species within the EU will have this change to allow member states to actually manage the population. And once again, I would come back to the fact that it is up to member states to decide whether they want to enact this or not. It was a vote to bring it to the Bern Convention in the first place, wherein a variety of member states said that they would vote in solidarity, but not actually enact it. And so there needs to be this discussion at each member state and national government to decide, well, is our population in need of changing this, or do we keep the protection, or do we do a different level to protect that? But this is, as I keep saying and others keep saying, it's a tool in order to ensure the management of the variety of different populations.
Thanks, John. I'm coming back to you. If you're speaking about favorable conservation status, I would say almost automatically we are speaking about monitoring. Let's say I've seen in the chat also monitoring is coming up, and I have to say, as long as I've been involved in large carnivores, monitoring has been an issue as let's say methods are different in different EU member states. People claim that you cannot compare one figure with the other. Can you give us an update where we are today in Europe with that monitoring, and how useful the monitoring of the different EU member states is if we want to come to a solution for a favorable conservation status?
Yeah. So in the autumn of 2024, the Large Carnivore Initiative delivered a new report on the conservation status of large carnivores with maps and numbers, which is sort of an update on the map which Frederick displayed. And our best estimate in that report was around 22,000 wolves in Europe. The data quality varies enormously. Like some countries, when we have the genotype of every single wolf in the population, and we know the relationship and everything, it's almost like an indecent invasion of kind of privacy, in a way that the wolves don't get any private life. In other countries, the numbers are much more vague and imprecise, and so that we have this huge kind of variation in techniques. We know how to monitor wolves accurately. It's just a question of, if you are applying the really best techniques to the really big populations, it becomes rather expensive. And it may not actually be so necessary in those large populations. So there will always be some degree of uncertainty. There will always be a fairly variation in techniques. But I actually don't experience huge conflicts today over numbers. I think the last 10, 15 years have really come to not a full kind of consensus, but I think the conflicts around numbers of wolves have become much less. And at least I think they are much less important than the discussions around how we actually manage them. So we are making progress. Some countries have a bit more to go, but we're certainly on a good path to reaching a much better overview. And like having a continent, I think there's very few other species groups reported on the Habitat Directive which have the same knowledge basis to draw on as our large carnivores. So kind of relatively, I think we're actually doing remarkably well for these very difficult and elusive species.
Okay, I will go to Friedrich, also on monitoring. Let's say, I know that a lot of the monitoring is done by nature conservation organizations. Is there also not a responsibility from their side to think about, let's say, a methodology which they can take up in common?
I mean, there are already lots of requirements on how to do monitoring. Some of us are engaged in this and developing proposals, and we do hope these proposals are heard. There are working groups under the Bern Convention, for example, on monitoring. There are other working groups, and there is the large carnivore expert groups, which will reconvene later this year. So lots of ideas how to do it, but I think there are already standards which just need to be applied. I don't really sense this is a major challenge, but maybe John has a different opinion. I'm not the monitoring expert, to be honest. Yeah, but indeed, to close, I think that is a key issue, of course, to have a good overview of how the populations are developing. Thank you.
Niall, it's not only about the populations of wolf. There is also monitoring on the number of attacks to livestock. Can you give us an update whether there is a uniform way of doing this, and what the figures are showing?
Thanks, Jürgen. With regard to the attacks themselves, it is varying from year to year, mainly due to the lack of coherent system across the EU. We look at Spain itself. Many of these, like within Spain, there is autonomous regions. There are different regimes with regard to how you actually check this. Mainly, it is coming from the compensation side. So under the CAP and under national funding in some countries, there is a compensation scheme with regard to livestock being killed by wolves and by packs. However, it can depend from how you show evidence of this. In some cases, they accept a photo to say that this is these are live dead carcasses. Sometimes you actually have to show evidence itself. But you know, when a wolf kills, it usually kills 20 and eats one, or something along those lines. And in this, it is not something that's really that much, it's something that you can, it's extremely tangible across the EU, where it is, you can actually pick it up and say, here we are. It is something that we need to try and build on. It's something that under the CAP, we do receive financing for the compensation, but due to the variety that is there, it's not coherent. It's something the same when it comes to actually how the implementation of the protection measures are there, where it is uptaken or not. Most of it can be anecdotal. I was even speaking to a farmer representative from the Pyrenees yesterday, where they said that they had colleagues that were considering not reporting on the French border because anecdotally, the French government didn't want to report it as a wolf in the area. But this, I'm not going into that, but this is something that even the conversation where, are they even reporting the numbers? Are they over-reporting? Is there a certain amount that can we even have the tangible figure there? No, because it is so varied across the way. So it is something that we do want to try and incorporate in the future when it comes to actually how we monitor wolves. Then it actually comes into monitoring the attacks, monitoring the kills after attacks, because oftentimes you even need to kill the animal after it's been attacked but hasn't been killed by the wolf. There's a variety of different aspects that we should be considering when it comes to monitoring, especially when it comes to attacks by predators.
Niall, I'm staying with you as we are speaking about livestock attacked. Let's say if we want to prevent that the wolf is able to attack the livestock, there are a number of measures which can be taken, electric fencing being one of them. Let's say what I see within the chat is that there's some people are discussing what the actual cost is for the farmer. Is that actually a high cost? Is that a cost which is for which the farmer is getting, let's say, one or the other refund from the government? And let's say also time-wise, is that really possible for the farmer to invest in this kind of coexistent measures?
So yeah, under coexistent measures already, there is, due to state aid rule changes in the past years, it allows that full funding can be brought if the member state so decides through the CAP itself, through the EAFRD. And in this, it is possible, but it's not always actually implemented. Sometimes it can be 80%. Sometimes I think it's even on the amount of sheep that you have. I think there was an example that was given to me, but I think it's Holstein Schleswig, where you have to have at least 500 sheep before you actually will get the full financing overall. So it does vary, but the majority can be there. It's the uptake. I would say that especially when you come to the transhumance regions where you're dealing with migrating, building a fence, an electric fence or not, is across a huge area. Housing is quite expensive as it is, and that's an investment that you're asking for the farmers and to make and then get the refund. And the same for the dogs. The dogs especially has been more uptaken, I would say, when it comes to the actual financing. that comes from the CAP and from national financing, and the alarms as well. But I would say that it once again, my answer is it varies. Just as the population varies, there are a variety of pickups of how the protection measures are actually done, and then as well as up to like maintaining the aspects, because maintenance is not covered. And this is something that we need to be aware of as well, that just because you put in the measure once doesn't mean that it's actually going to stay the same forever and ever, and that it doesn't require financial input to help with that.
Friedrich, we have just heard that, let's say, if farmers want to protect their livestock, that there is a certain cost as well, financial as time-wise. How do you react from the nature conservation organizations to those claims? Is there something where let's say a nature conservation organization can assist? Do you consider those costs as being too high at the level of the individual farmer?
I can only I can only say that I listened to what Niall just said, and we are, of course, it is not our aim, to have an extraordinary burden on the farmers. I mean, we take that message and we acknowledge that this is a problem. But I think having good management of the wolves and having this coexistence is a common obligation for the society, and we do see a key role there for the administration, for the states to support the necessary funding. Of course, in the specific cases, we can see if we can, in the frame of a project, also support. But overall, I think that is where we see the need for the financial support, and that has been asked for.
Friedrich, this has been the last question for you, as I know that you have to catch a train, and I don't want to be the one responsible for you missing that train. So I would like to thank you very much for your participation in this panel.
Thank you very much as well. And if there are any questions coming up, I have not been able to look at the chat, then I'm available. I can put the email into the chat so people can get in touch.
Well, that would be great. If people would still have questions, then they can reach you there directly. A very big thank you for your participation, and safe travels. My two other panelists should not leave immediately because you are not yet off the hook. I would like to go to John. Let's say next to livestock, I've seen in the chat some people are also speaking about, yeah, the wolf is losing its shyness, and so there is not only a risk to work towards livestock, but also to people living in the countryside. What is the status over there?
Wow, you really like to give me the difficult questions, Jürgen, today. No, this is one of probably the questions that concerns most people today. Part of it, I think, is a question of expectation. That all of us have kind of grown up with, kind of nature documentaries that display the wolf as being something living in the wilderness, right? So the wolf always lives, somewhere over there. But last 20 years have shown that the wolf has come back to living in our backyards, right? Now, like having wolves in the high density population areas in like Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, Germany. This is really clashing, I think, a bit with the expectations that people have. So when people do see a wolf, crossing a field or crossing a road, somehow it seems kind of wrong. But I would argue that very much it's the expectation that's wrong, not the actual kind of observation of the wolves living in our modern landscapes. Wolves are able to adapt pretty much to most of our modern day European landscapes. But certainly when people encounter a wolf at 20, 30, 40 meters, and the wolf is approaching or not running away, or if it's trying to attack their dog, then this is something totally different. And these are situations that we do not want to see. And they are situations where certainly there is a need for concern and probably reaction. The question is, will hunting, for example, remove this problem by selection, by, say, genetic selection, or taking out the bold individuals? We simply don't know. We are moving into uncharted territory here. We know that we need to be cautious. We know that sometimes we have to react, but the nature of the reaction is something that we are learning as we go. So I think that's my plea throughout this whole kind of new era that we're heading into now, is that we learn as we go. We don't have all the answers to every question. We're going to be doing things differently in different places. So I really hope that we document as we go. And then hopefully in 5 years, 10 years time, we really will be able to answer these questions with much more authority.
Okay, thank you very much. Niall, also with you, we have been speaking about the threat to livestock. But okay, let's say in the countryside, we do not only have livestock, we also have farmers. From your information, do they feel threatened by the wolf, or is this, let's say, for farmers really a problem which is directly linked to livestock?
Wolves rarely attack humans themselves, but it is, I guess, a sense of fear itself. You can feel fear in advance of being attacked, whether you are attacked or not. I think it is something more so, like if they fear being attacked, it's not necessarily the farmers, but perhaps those that live in rural communities themselves, that are not necessarily dealing with livestock or in the nature themselves, like in the farming themselves, but the actual fear comes from people who live there, rural dwellers themselves, who are hiking, who are just out in the nature. So it is more that aspect for the fear of attacks for people. But when it comes to the effect that wolf attacks can have on livestock themselves, that can have quite a traumatic experience for the farmer, especially when it is a large killing, or the fact that this can actually affect, especially in pregnant animals, pregnant ewes, that they will lose the fetus, that they might need to be culled themselves afterwards by the farmer after they've been found attacked. And so this is more so the fear. It's not. It's rare that they're actually attacked by humans. That wolves attack humans. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for this. Let's say within the chat we have several people who are asking, the further procedure, how much time it's going to take, and what are the different steps. Andrea, I've seen that you're still with us. I think you're the best one placed, even if you're not a member of the panel, but to answer that question. Can you give us an idea on what is happening the coming weeks and months?
You mean on the legal proposal?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, on this one, I mean, where I think it's more appropriate for the two members of the parliament, because the commission did its job, and then we made the proposal on the 7th of March. Now it's really to the member state and the MEPs to hopefully agree with it. As Herbert Dorfman said, is a yes or no proposal. Is not anything to be discussed. It's because it's a proposal to downgrade the wolf. So it's not that there's other things to change or so on. So it's a yes and no. So hopefully we count on a quick adoption. I heard from Herbert Dorfman a calendar for a possible vote in plenary already in May, which means that probably by the summer or early autumn, the proposal could be adopted and then published in the official journal. but we're entirely in the hands of the Parliament and the Council, so member state and the members of the Parliament.
Okay, even if you are in the hands of the European Parliament, you still were able to give a kind of time frame so that we have an idea how things could move in the near future. One more question for you, while I have you on the screen. Let's say there is some concern in the chat that the wolf is just a first of a number of species being downlisted. Do you see that as a risk?
Well, not really. I think the Commission made it quite clear that there is quite a peculiar situation for the wolf, and this is why it came with its proposal in 2023 for the Bern Convention. Again, we are under the umbrella of the Bern Convention, so this is the first time ever in the history of the Bern Convention that there was a downgrading of a protection of the species. Is also the first time under the Habitats Directive. It's because I think from the beginning, all the speakers have highlighted that the wolf, for a number of reasons, is a very peculiar species. I think that the Habitats Directive has all the flexibility embedded in the legislation to allow to tackle rapidly all the problematic species or populations and so on. There are derogation possibilities and so on, and there are a lot of examples of member states who fully exploit these flexibilities and are able to address any conflicted issues. Of course, we will see what the situation of the State of Nature report will be. The Commission will publish in 2026 its assessment on the basis of the data that will come from the member state in July this year. And on that basis, we will see how much has improved the conservation status and the trends of a number of species and habitats, because this will be quite important also to be able to report globally to the CBD towards our commitment towards the global community and the global biodiversity framework. So I guess that by end 2026 we'll have a better picture, and then we will take it from there, probably with any kind of assessment and gap analysis, whatever this is for after.
Okay, thank you very much. It's now my task to make a number of closing remarks. Let's say I will give a little bit what I took out of the conversation, as well of Mr. Dorfman, as from Andrea, as well as the members of the panel. Let's say a lot of what we do, we are referring to favorable conservation status, whether that is coming from the Nature Conservation Organization, from the farmers' organizations. We hear that let's say at a science level, there's still quite some work to do to come up to a good procedure of what is called a complicated concept. Let's say we learned that the status in the different parts of Europe is quite different. So there probably it's good that they have the opportunity also to tackle this downgrading in different ways. If you're speaking about livestock attacks, we have heard that there is a certain cost for the farmers as well, time-wise as financial, and that indeed there should be a certain support for those being confronted with the wolf, and to make sure that, let's say, a certain level of coexistence can be reached. On the risk, the real risk for people, let's say, that remains limited. And that brought me back to a moment that I was as chair of the European Large Carnivore Platform in Sweden, when the meeting started, let's say, with a scientific overview of how many wolf attacks there has been towards hunting dogs and people. And let's say that was the moment that my eldest daughter just informed me and my wife the week before that she was pregnant. Now, the reaction of my wife was that, oh, if you are pregnant, the first thing we will do next weekend is we will buy a new car, because I want to have absolutely a safer car to make sure that the grandchild is safe. Let's say if we are looking at the actual figures of the risk that the grandchild would be killed in an accident, that's extremely low. Now, anyhow, we have bought that new car, and let's say as I was in Sweden, we were extremely happy that it was a Swedish car as well. But let's say there we also see that there is a very different situation between a real risk and a perceived risk, and that, let's say, fear is certainly an aspect where we have to think on how that should be tackled. Let me thank you, first of all, our host, member of the European Parliament and chair of this intergroup, Juan Ignacio Zoido. Let me also thank Herbert Dorfman as a member of the European Parliament to make time free for this webinar. Andrea, thanks to you, because I know you too within the Commission, you have a very busy agenda, and it's always a challenge to make sure that all of those requests coming to you can be fulfilled. Let's say I had a great panel. John, as I said, you can call me whenever you feel depressed. I will repeat my words. And also a very big thank you that even if I was giving you the most difficult questions, to systematically give an excellent answer and let's say a good basis, scientific basis for the discussion. Niall, thanks for bringing to us the views from the farmers. And Friedrich, who is not longer with us, and that means he took the train, not that he died in the meantime. Thanks also to him for the opinion from the nature conservation organizations. Thanks also to all of you who have been listening, who have been participating through putting your questions in the chat. I have tried, let's say, to have as much as possible of those questions going into the debate. I will ask the organizers if they have the opportunity also to provide the experts with what has been asked and written in the chat, and maybe a number of additional questions, answers to your questions can come to you later on. So also thank you for participating, staying with us, and thanks to all. Have a nice evening.